Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. I think Richard has probably the loudest keyboard on the planet. I'm guessing it's his keyboard. That's all right. Well, it's just, hang on. Well, have we got the black marker here somewhere? Gentlemen, can you just put a black mark down against his name there? Oh, Nicola's gone sideways as
Knife
well.
Knife Edge Nicola, that's what we'll call him.
Knife Edge Nicola, that is what we'll call him from here on in. Hello, UAV Shed, how are you? I'm not sure why Nicola's holding on. I'm not sure. Oh, no, come on. Oh, that's okay. That works for Bruce and I. We're in the Southern Hemisphere. That's all right.
You can tell we're professional streamers, can't you?
Oh, yeah. It's all happening here, isn't it? Hang on. Here comes Richard. Let's add him to the stream. G'day, Richard. Nice to meet you.
It's Rupert.
Or Rupert.
Rupert, Richard.
Yeah.
So it's all coming together. It's all coming together very well, isn't it? It's almost like we can. So professional. Sorry. Should we start again? Should we pretend that so I'll say hello, UAV Shed again. Here we all are. Yeah, right. Well, g'day. What a week. What a week of nonsense in the world. The nonsense currently going around that I can't get confirmed is that Unique's gone bankrupt. So that's something that's happening as we go to air, as they say. I don't think it's necessarily true. I think it's some little thing in America, perhaps. Well done, Craig. You've joined Bruce's group, the women's group that he stood up. So that's well done, you. Hello there. Oh, man, never going to get your name right in India. Good morning to you. I think it's probably 3 o'clock in the morning to you. And with that, I managed to get rid of Nicola. So anyway, anyone have any thoughts on the Unique thing before we then maybe we can mention the M300 thing before we go into our technical description of Richard's thing?
Yeah, I've had a quick look on the Unique. This has been bubbling for about 3 weeks. I saw a couple of posts on it a few weeks ago, and there was hints that something was going on in the US. And the original thought was it was COVID related, and it now appears that it could be something more serious in the sense of whoever has been Unique's partner or Unique USA might not be reopening. And there's rumors of chapter whatever they call it in the US, in bankruptcy we call it in the UK. But that has happened before. It happened 2 years ago, and it was the main distributor in the US that went. Currently, we don't really know. I haven't actually heard from the UK guys for a while as well, and it'd be interesting. I'll actually try and reach out to them and see how they're doing, because I haven't heard much from them for a while, and I haven't even seen any content, because they were quite busy, weren't they, putting content out for Unique for quite a long time, and I haven't heard nothing from them. So something's going on. We just don't really know what.
Yeah, as you say in the comments, it's been saying no change there. I've reached out to somebody. I happen to know somebody quite senior from Unique is actually traveling in the USA at the minute. I don't know why they're traveling in the USA at the minute. Someone from China is there and doing their thing. So something is afoot, and that's probably in one would like to think in the world of conspiracy that it's connected with the DJI Autel thing. So let's everyone else is making a video and talking about that this week. So shall we talk about that?
Yeah, it's a funny one, because there's really, you've got all of the Autel guys going, yes, down, burn them, take them out. You've got the real players in the industry, in the sense of the people who understand this and look into this are coming out and saying, hold on a minute, this is very bad for everyone. If this patent goes through, they close to have a patent on fitting props on a motor. They also hold a few other patents, and basically one of them is virtually waypoints. Another one is virtually all object avoidance systems. So if these are upheld, Autel have the capability of preventing every manufacturer from selling their aircraft. So it's unlikely to get anywhere. I think, funny enough, we spoke about this quickly off air, and I think this is nothing more than the best marketing exercise Autel have ever had, because they've got every blog, every drone. We're talking about it. They can't buy this kind of advertising. The product can't generate this kind of advertising. They can put the product out and everyone goes, oh, okay. You might get a video about it. I think I did 2 videos on it. It's Bruce doesn't pick up on these things, on the consumer stuff like that. Most of the people just sort of skim over the top of it. Whereas now, every drone channel, pretty much world over, every drone website has been bouncing, could DJI get banned here? So I don't think it'll happen. I think
No.
there'll be a settlement, or it'll go away, or they'll just get it quashed and it will go away for everyone. And even then, it's a win-win for them, whatever happens.
Well, I must admit, I'm a little bit more worried. Okay, this will be bad news, but if Amazon sees a win and it's upheld, Amazon has got so many dodgy drone patents. It's unreal. If they start calling those in, then nobody will be flying anyway.
No, I was just going to say, and the thing is, if you to look at this, they didn't make this design, and okay, that fundamentally doesn't change the fact they own a patent, but I still run the principle: if you design something and then you patent it and it's unique and it's individual to your company and you want to protect that IP, that's fantastic. But we've seen over the years large companies just buying up patents to be able to slam their competitors with, and this is what has happened here. Unique didn't create this; they acquired this patent in about 2017, and then they started litigation 4 months after. And they actually acquired it after DJI released the Mavic Pro, which used this design. One of the main accusations. So it's clearly being done to rattle a cage, but it's rattled some interesting people in the industry, because a lot of people have looked at this and gone, whoa, this isn't about two players. I'll just say one last thing. I did hear this is the second time they've sued each other for various reasons, and I do know it didn't go down particularly well in the home market last time, because remember, these are two Chinese companies, and I do believe it was not very well liked the first time around, so it'll be interesting to see what happens this time.
Indeed. Bruce, you said something wise about patents once, and I've promptly forgotten it. But and we spoke about purchasing of patents before. You knew the play. Tell me the play again.
Yeah, well, a lot of companies trade the IP as the most valuable aspect of the company. I think you look at many companies that make more money out of licensing their IP than they do out of making products or providing services. So, and if you're going out there into the venture capital market, you've got to have your IP protected with patents. So it is a crucial part of any business these days, especially in the high-tech sector. But I think people forget that a patent is only a license to sue. And just because you've got a patent doesn't mean that your invention is novel or able to be protected, because the patent officers don't investigate to that level of depth. They just make sure it ticks the right boxes, and then the courts have to decide whether your patent is valid or not. So when this sort of thing goes on, it's not a fait accompli. They may have a patent, but it may not be enforceable. And even if it is enforceable, the courts may rule that the losses to the injured party are so small they're not worth providing damages or anything. There's a whole lot of unknowns. It's really not as cut and dry as a lot of people think.
Well, I would have thought there's stacks and stacks of evidence for different ways of attaching propellers to motors over the last 100 and odd years of manned aviation and boats as well, I guess. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's how far do you go with this? When you look at it, how far do you go? Do you relate it to just, the crux of this is to stop the wrong propeller going on the wrong motor. That's the crux of the patent, and it has the labeling, the little circle that DJI or the markings that they put on it. But as you say, this is basic stuff. How far do you go with a patent? It is interesting, something Skytrain said in the comments about Chinese respecting IP. I think the problem is, I've seen a lot of comments about nasty DJI stealing stuff. I think we have to often remember they have innovated more in this industry than anyone. The Phantom was their own design. There wasn't a clone before that. The Mavic, yes, there were folding drones, but no one did what they have done time again. The Inspire, the Phantom, the Mavic. They're not the sort of company that doesn't do innovation. Let's be honest. They really do produce a decent product that is of their own. And Autel have clearly ripped the Mavic off. I don't think anyone can deny it's not a rip-off. It looks identical. No other manufacturer has done that. Unique, Skydio, 3DR. The Solo didn't look remotely like a Phantom. It was still its own design. Yet time and time again, Autel have virtually cloned the aircraft other than its colour.
Yeah, no, true enough. Now, Richard's come along for a beating, as ever, but he's brought a friend this time to help him out.
Moral support.
Moral support, yeah, absolutely. So before we delve into your open source remote ID device, is there anything that you can't tell us that we can extract from you about things going on in the UTM market at the moment?
No.
No, nothing going on at all. I can't think of a way.
Very quiet.
Is it very quiet? Oh, good. Well,
No
that's
people,
well then.
it's all that manned.
Yes, nothing in the sky. Were you involved in that trial off of to the Isle of Wight? Are you part of that?
The remote
Are you allowed to say
stuff that's happening.
the delivery
race
stuff?
Yeah. No, we do a lot of work with Cranfield, but we're not directly involved in the flight trials that are taking place. I think if we start removing pilots from the loop, that would be a bit more interesting for us. But at the moment, my understanding is it's primarily still remote piloted over that distance.
Yeah, no, it did look like that from the landing I saw. But anyway, the robot would have done a much better job. But anyway, I shouldn't have said that, should I? I just wondered how many flights they've actually done, because I saw the first one. I saw the ADS-B track of the first one. But I don't think I've seen another one since. I'll be quite disappointed if it is just one flight. I'd be very disappointed, actually. But anyway, let's speak to well, really, we don't need to speak to Richard, do we? We must speak to Rupert, because he's the man with the exciting thing here, which is open source remote ID. Come on, this is how you guys at Altitude Angels should be making money out of us. You should be charging us for a device to fit to an aircraft and make a proprietary system that no one else can use. Why are you doing remote ID wrong?
Well, I think, Gary, you've just explained exactly why we're doing remote ID the way we're trying to do remote ID. It's all about kind of recognizing the fact that the drone industry grew up from people building drones, building their own drones from bits of electronics and motors and props and all the rest of it. And that community still exists within the drone. I can see people with 3D printers in front of me at the moment. And I think it's important that that idea of being able to make your own thing and not be locked into one vendor is an important thing to be part of what Scout is all about. And I think more importantly, Scout is all about enabling those aircraft to be seen in the air, and it doesn't matter which UTM that sees that aircraft, or indeed which any other system sees that aircraft. It's more important about it being seen and that being accessible to a large audience.
So do you want to unpack it? Hang on, what says? So will the Altitude Angel system also be able to be used by manned flights? Well, yeah, that's an interesting question, isn't it? I'll put that
well, there's always the whole certification thing there with manned flights, and indeed with general aviation, using a piece of safety equipment that hasn't gone through certification. Who knows where this might go? It is an open source project, so people contributing to it is the whole kind of point here. And maybe the destination of that is a certification for putting on manned aircraft, but it's not our primary motivation at the moment.
And if it's UAS only, is it rather pointless? I was just reading it. Is this pointless because it's half measure otherwise?
Well, that's the legislation in itself is pointless from that point of view, in the sense of, isn't it? You know what I mean? We're heading into
elaborate for those of us that don't pay attention to you.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Me.
Exactly.
No, well, the legislation point of view, in a year, well, potentially 2 years, it's going to be mandatory. Remote ID is now mandatory. The new CAA update in CAP 1789 actually goes to move it out of the aircraft requirements and into the pilot requirements. Up until the initial requirements within the EASA regulations, 945 and 947, all remote ID was very much under the requirements of certain types of aircraft. So it was the C1, C2, C3 classes. Now, what's ended up happening with the new release of the CAA documentation, and the interesting bit is the EASA documentation actually hasn't been released yet to tell us about this. All the CAA is saying is that we've visually seen this, so we're going to add this in, is that every pilot must now ensure that their aircraft is fitted with a working remote ID system. And what they're doing is, whereas before it was part of the aircraft requirements, they're actually making it a pilot requirement now, just like registration is. And whilst we haven't seen the detail of this document, it would imply that every single aircraft will have to have a remote ID solution, whether it be network, like these guys are proposing here, or broadcast. But they do now have both doors open on that.
So Ian, the part of the problem that we were trying to solve really was twofold. One, let's create a low-cost, affordable solution that anyone can implement with any system for their vehicle. But two, try and go a little bit step further and provide a mechanism through which the UTM system, or the remote system, doesn't have to be a UTM, whatever server you're connecting to can talk back to the drone over the same channel. And that's a means actually for collecting broadcast ID from another location and then sending that information to a drone over the data link, because that drone may not have the receiving equipment on board that it needs to otherwise pick it up. So it's a nice way of being able to aggregate on the network side, potentially countless sources of what we call surveillance data, so information that we've sensed from the environment, and then funneling that through a channel so that you can pick it up and use it in your drone application.
So looking at Scout, I've done an overview. I haven't actually delved into the firmware yet. I wanted to have a look. So, at this moment in time, Scout is an open source. We have a microcontroller, which is coupled to basically a radio network system. So we're going on whether it be a radio modem or it's going to be a cellular modem. You guys then are going to provide an open source firmware to go with that. Then from what my understanding is, and then the user will be able to choose the platform they go on to. Is that the plan with this?
That's right.
Yeah. So they're going to be able
do you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, fundamentally, that's the idea. We wanted to harness the existing open source community there is around the Arduino platform. So the microcontroller on board the PCB is standard AVR microcontroller that you get in Arduino. And I was going to demo this, but obviously my camera setup didn't work before the show, so might as well pull it to bits now. Again, we're using commercial off-the-shelf kind of componentry, so that's a 4G module with GPS on it.
7100, isn't it?
Yep, SIM 7100E. Yeah. And there are lots of different types of those on the market. And they basically use a modem protocol to talk between the microcontroller and that modem. And the initial version of the firmware that we've got that up there on the GitHub has support for the SIM 7100E and the AVR microcontroller to be able to do, and support for Altitude Angels UTM. But because it's open source, there is absolutely no reason why anybody from the community couldn't build other protocols into that. So we had the announcement today from Invali around their remote ID stuff. I know that their stuff is based on an API. There's no reason why you couldn't make Scout talk to Invali directly. You could make it talk to AirMap, and indeed their APIs are public. So I'm guessing the community will do that at some point as well.
Sorry, I just want to say, so at the moment, obviously, you guys have provided the network solution, basing it on 4G. Have you got an intention to provide, or have you considered providing a broadcast ID element, or are you going to let the community decide on that one if they want to go down that side of it?
Yes, on both counts. We thought about it. The main driver behind using cellular initially is because we as a company want to be able to enable beyond visual line of sight flight and a highly automated flight, and you're just not going to get that on Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. You'll get a certain amount of distance, but you're not going to get it unless you move to a cellular type network. And obviously, there are other challenges with cellular networks as well. Like most cell providers actually don't quite like things flying up in the sky with cellular range at the moment, but they're all thinking about how to do that. But yeah, we did look at Wi-Fi and Bluetooth as well, but the main reason we didn't go with that for the first off is just range and being enabling BB loss flights. I have been doing a bit of experimenting with some other versions of the Arduino microcontroller, so the ESP8266 and the ESP32, both of which have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi built in.
Go 32, go 32, go 32.
I've got all sorts of bits over here, but I want to show you. But I think that remote ID is an interesting one. The main push, it seems, for remote ID is mostly about aligned with registration. I think it's mostly about going, there's a thing in the sky over there, who owns it? And it's less about, I want to know there's a thing in the sky and where it is and what it's doing and what its intent is, and provide navigation guidance to keep it safe.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why we went down that line. A lot of the current remote ID standards, ASTM included, are very much focused on identifying whose drone that is, because I think they're trying to cover the first initial piece of the legal framework, as opposed to find a way of actually managing things that fly in the sky safely.
Yeah, the CAA have openly said, if you look at 1789, it's not about safety. They've openly said this is about security and data. So on the device, because obviously one of the requirements of the remote ID standard is for it to either send the location of the home point or transmit the location of the pilot. Now, obviously, from this point of view, it's going to be taking the home point location. Does it store that automatically? Is it using sensors to say, right, it's now taken off, store this point, or does the user press a button? Because this is one of the bits I've come up with thinking, how do we store that data as part of the remote ID requirement?
So we're not actually doing the home. Where's my ball gone? There it is. We're not actually doing the home location at the moment.
Okay.
But it is definitely one of those things that we've got on the roadmap. You probably can't see here very well on the
no,
side.
I've only had some sort of better camera setup.
Yeah, I need a bit. Yeah, I don't know. Well, what happened there? So there's a pair button on the side of it. So we're really conscious that we wanted to make this as secure as possible. So making sure everything's encrypted, but also that people can't spoof devices and stuff like that. So we've got a pairing mechanism that works with our UTM as part of our surveillance API. And the idea is
so that's the system. Is it that pairs to the net? That's pairing to the back end server system.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. But there's an event that happens as part of the standard. So your standard sort of operational procedure for this, let's do a ConOps. It would be to turn it on, wait till it's got a GPS lock, and there's an LED on there that will tell you that it's got a GPS lock, and then you're going to pair it. So you press and hold the pair button, and you would use something that was internet connected to log into a web browser and initiate pairing for this device. It would then receive a token from Altitude Angel, and you would be given confirmation that it's got its token, and then it's ready. Now, at the moment, we don't grab the GPS location at the point of pairing, but there's absolutely no reason we couldn't, and that would be the home location. And once you've done that, and it was transmitting its location, you could verify that in the UTM as well. You then put it on your drone and off you fly.
See, the interesting thing with the network ID requirements is in some ways, it's more secure than what's being proposed on the broadcast, because broadcast has to be open for everyone to access. And I still have fundamental issues with the home location of a pilot being transmitted all of the time. I feel that there's privacy and safety issues for a commercial operator having your drone openly send out that information to everyone. Now, under the current framework, that's going to go to you securely or the UTM securely via the network, and then that's going to be available for everyone to see via an app or whatever. But that's not your problem. That's the problem of what the standard allows. The issue I have with all of the remote IDs is this. I think we spoke about it before. I have no issue with it sending a specific token. I have no issues with it sending something that law enforcement can go, oh, that's him. I still have this fundamental issue of everyone can see it, every bit of data all of the time. We can all see a car license plate, but that doesn't tell us where the person lives, if you see what I'm saying. And only the right people have access to that information. And that's still the gripe with the remote ID solution.
Yeah, and I think that's probably also why we prefer network remote ID as well, because it gives you some element of privacy control there as well.
So a quick question. How do you plan to do integration with existing flight controllers? let's say DJI Autopilot PX4. That's fundamental at the moment, right?
You know, that is definitely where we're going to need some community involvement, because it's not an expertise area of Altitude Angel specifically. So the device has got provision for an ITC bus, which most drones have some kind of provision for.
Yeah, not ITC.
Yeah.
It has its drawbacks.
Can you please go CAN bus, please, if possible? Because
what protocol, Louis? What protocol?
The thing is, and technically speaking, I2C does not scale very well with distance. So if we are going to put I2C connections to external device, it might get complicated too, and the system might not work as desired. And also the bandwidth is limited, and there are also issues with on I2C. Yes, it's doable. So preferably either a serial, another serial, or a bus that supports multi-devices like CAN bus.
If it's serial, it's going to have to support 2 protocols, to cover. Look, we've got 3 protocols pretty much, which are widespread, which is Mavlink, MSP, the 2 versions of MSP. CAN would be nice, but then again, half the industry doesn't support CAN, and there are 2 versions of CAN which aren't compatible with each other. It's not a problem at all to try and get this nice and easy.
It's a minefield, which is why we decided to start with I2C, and accepting it's got some fairly significant drawbacks, but it's also pretty simple, and it's a good place to start. And I get at the moment it's not actually in the firmware. That's something that we're probably aiming for in a couple of months to get out in there, and it would be initially just some very basic stuff around being able the device to be able to communicate that it's connected and working, but eventually it would also integrate with our tactical conflict resolution service. So that's the thing that would be using the UTM to see everything else in the sky and then say there's something over there and it's heading towards you. You might want to change your vector over there. And again, the way we want to try and work that is very much on the side of the UTM providing guidance to the avionics, not instructing the avionics to do it, although you could do that as well.
Yeah, because for instance, on Autopilot, we already have some kind of avoidance built in with ADSB. Yeah. So we have direct support for the ADSB.
It'd be very simple, Louis, wouldn't it? It'd be really easy to translate that straight in. We wouldn't take a lot at all.
Perfectly simple to have it going on tomorrow.
Yeah.
By 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock tomorrow. Yeah.
To be fair,
I have some questions.
Mavlink could go. Yeah.
I've got some questions.
Bruce.
Just looking at the Arduino, so is this going to run Arduino scripts, or is you running basically assembled code for this thing, the firmware you're developing?
So it's firmware is developed in C, compiles straight down to AVI.
Okay. So why then bother with the Atmel at all? Why didn't you go with something a little bit more forward-looking like the STM32? Because anyone that's developed anything on a microcontroller knows that within 6 months of developing it, you need something that's 3 times more powerful. And there's no real progression path in the 8-bit Atmel market space. You started with STM32. There are plenty of people who have those skills within the open source community, and it gives you so much more options. You've got the CAN bus, you've got a lot of other stuff. You've got a lot of forward movement on that. Whereas if you stick with 8-bit, you're going to bang against the wall pretty soon, I think, especially with all the extra functionality you're looking at adding. And if you want to go AES encryption or anything like that.
I might have to defend them now. I can see why.
Oh, why?
They've started. Yeah, but it's better than not starting. That's what I'm going to say.
Anytime you start something, you've got to look ahead further than the end of next week, especially when it's open source, because otherwise you'll find you'll have 500,000
you've just got to start. You've just got to start.
Start at the right point.
Sorry, I'm on the wrong team. Sorry, I'll get back to Bash in a minute.
The other thing I was wondering is, you've got a cellular modem in there. Wouldn't it be, I look at it from a point of view of cost, probably not a lot of people don't, but I do. Wouldn't it be better just to have it tethered to your phone using Wi-Fi, so your phone did the cellular connection? Otherwise, you've got another SIM, you've got another account to pay, you've got another set of data charges, all that sort of stuff.
Bruce?
Yeah?
The problem with that is we get very long distance, right?
Yeah. But okay, use a bigger But you use a lot of people are operating within a Wi-Fi type of range, though. You can still operate a lot of local stuff. You're operating on a site. Yeah. So that should be an option, I think.
You don't need a UTM, right, to help you out with that if you're flying primarily VLOS. This is a kind of future-looking device to help unlock the market for going VLOS.
Yeah, fair enough. Future looking on 8-bit, that's a contradiction in terms. And this is a standalone self-contained device from what I've seen of the initial prototype stuff. Is that an 18650 battery in there that's on the battery holder?
It is, but that is one of the things that we're going to change quite soon. That battery is actually quite overkill for what's needed.
Heavy.
In fact, actually, that is what I'm working with at the moment, a lithium polymer-based one, 2 amp hour one, and we're going to get a hardware revision out fairly soon for that.
Yeah, and do you need certification for a standalone device in an aircraft? If you can take your cell phone on an aircraft, you don't need it certified. Why, if this is standalone in a little plastic box, why would you need to have it certified for manned aviation use?
It's for navigation use.
If it's for navigation, it has to be certified. So you can't use the GPS on your phone in an airplane. Do people use the GPS on their phone?
They do, but they're not supposed to.
No, you're not supposed to. No, you're not supposed to.
We need to crack down on this. I'm going to lodge a complaint with CAA.
Chris, one of the pathways as well is that the UTM system can talk back to either the ground station controller or to the drone itself and potentially take control. So there's a level of certification over and above that. And actually, part of the Scout project has been submitted to the UK CAA for the electronic conspicuity trials later this year. And it's also forming part of several future flight bids as well here in the UK. So again, we've got to go classic altitude angel in some respects. We're trying to push the bar out a little bit and figure out what is actually appropriate. What do we need to do? How do we do that? What are the lessons we need to learn? And coming back to your earlier question around, why did we not start off with some, real-time OS 64-bit Linux kind of processor? And the answer is quite simply, it doesn't need it right now. The project goals were to effectively go for the lowest common multiple. What has everyone got knocking around on their bench somewhere? What has every university got access to at incredibly low cost? And if you are a university student building airframes or you're testing, doing R&D, then you want to be sinking all of your research and all of your money into the airframes and into the payload, into the sensors, etc., not into effectively, the avionics, right? So, again, we're always first and foremost a software company. But what we needed to do was to create some interfaces that demonstrate the power of that software and how easy it is to work with. So we fully expect, actually, we'll get a lot of integrations from people who are saying, right, well, actually, no, I don't want this Arduino-based chip. I've actually got a quad-core, octa-core machine on board my drone. I'm going to integrate direct from that. And that's absolutely cool. We wanted to put something out there that was kind of 50, 60 pounds, that kind of price, that anyone can effectively put together. And get a really good result from day one.
And the beauty of the Arduino platform is that actually Arduino is available for STM32, ESP8266, ESP32, all of those. And whilst we haven't written that with it in mind, from a software point of view, actually making that portable should be a very simple job. So absolutely, I see the firmware. I see the firmware within the scope of the project, not forking across multiple projects, but I see the firmware supporting more hardware as that community derives need for that.
So,
Louis, what do you think? You've had experience with flight controllers, different processors, and they seem to need to get bigger.
Why don't you guys provide a library to integrate on flight controllers? Let's say ArduPilot, it's one I'm most involved. So if you just provide a new library to be enabled on the firmware, then ArduPilot will take over all of that, and only would have to connect to the 4G modem. That would be easy.
Could be a Lewis script, Louis. There's a thing. Okay, Richard, I'm going to hit you with the hard one now. Okay, you've supplied this lovely open source piece of hardware. You've given us firmware. You've given us a way that people can integrate. Is this just not a way to force us into your software platform?
That's not really a hard one. I thought you were going to give me a difficult one. No, in a nutshell. I mean, out of the box, it comes without firmware, but anyone can write their own adapter to effectively go from the modem and the GPS to their own system. And actually, as we put in the Scout documentation, it doesn't have to be a UTM, right? It could be a piece of software. You've stood up a local web server and you want to send it to your own endpoint. We're very clear as kind of the project maintainers. We're going to maintain an index of all the UTMs that have services available, and then we're going to actually have a matrix on that says what services that you can connect to with the Scout firmware. But again, why didn't we? To go back to Lewis's question, why didn't we just provide a library? We had to pick a minimum set of things that we wanted to achieve, right? We're not doing this as 100% of entirely Altitude Angel's time, but what we're prepared to do is listen to what you folks and the community are telling us they want to do. So get on the GitHub and start adding issues, start adding requests for the next thing you want to see, and then we'll prioritize in that order. Because again, we really wanted this to be a project which is owned by the drone community, whether that's academic, commercial, industrial, recreational. You guys drive it, tell us what you want. And in the process, if we find that there are things missing on the server side, services that you really, really desperately want or need, then we'll go build those out too. So, yeah, I mean, not really that hard a question, Ian. You have to do better.
I don't want to have to do it, but I really don't want to have to do this. But I'm going to have to do.
Yes, you do, Gary.
Yeah, but what we've got to remember here is that there are other UTMs and service providers that are queuing up to charge you a chunk of money for this sort of system. You're not going to be able to. It's going to have. I see in the comments people are talking about cell phone signals and things like that. That's going to be a given, I'm afraid. Wherever you are in the world, a lot of people are going that way. People are queuing up to charge you money for this, and you won't have access to them to moan at them, as Richard Gamely always comes on to be moaned at. So we've just got to bear that in mind and give it context. And if it's to be successful, then people should jump on board and moan at them some more, as Richard said in GitHub, and bash it into something. It's the way it should be. We should be taking solutions to the regulator instead of people with deep wallets going with their, oh, look, you really need this, and a lovely meal out at the same time, whilst we make sure that you drive this into being. I'll stop ranting now. Someone else continue arguing with him.
I wouldn't have it. You said you were going to have a go with him.
I just have one question for Richard. You guys released that on open source. Which version of open source? GPL v3, v2, BXD?
That's a very good question, and I'm just scrambling to get the two licenses released it under, because there is a hardware project and there is a firmware project. So hang on, I'm just opening the license.md file, which is public, anyone can do that. We've put the firmware under the Apache 2.0 license, and the hardware is licensed under Creative Commons BYSA, which is the one with attribution, etc. So, we mimicked what was happening in the Arduino world on the hardware side and on the firmware side as well, to give folks flexibility. So if you want to build it into something commercial, knock yourselves out. There's no restriction to doing that.
Okay. No, that's important to know, because some of the open source licenses can be restrictive, and whatever the commercial partners would have developed on top would now revert back to the original project. So that is important also.
Are you talking about PX4, Louis, again? Did I just say that?
So one of the reasons
I look the other way
is because we spend so much time trying to pick the right combination of licenses for folks. We really did stress over that quite a bit, because we wanted to make sure it was as permissive as it could be, and it made sense, and folks would understand it, and that also contributions that came in from other folks in the community were also under the same terms. Because it's quite common, you see in a lot of licenses, that a contributor doesn't necessarily grant all the rights to other people who then use it as the creators of the project. So we really wanted to make sure that wasn't going to be a concern for folks who implemented it and then relied on it.
I think, to be fair,
what we can say is, as it is now the project, we could port the code to inside a flight stack and have the code running on a flight stack, given that we give the correct interfaces to the hardware. Will it be possible?
I'm not familiar enough, I don't think, with RGPilot to be able to answer that question, but very possibly. I mean, it's, the surveillance API that we've got is a relatively simple API. If the controller's got the ability to make an HTTPS connection to the internet and manage JSON responses to and from, then it can do it.
To a point, mind. I am just, the where that code is running is the least important part of this, in the sense of the size of the controller isn't a major issue here. We're going to have to add a modem anyway, if you see what I'm saying. So if a modem's got to be added, you're adding the AVR isn't going to make much of a difference.
And in all honesty, most of the work in terms of CPU horsepower is being done by the modem module. It's doing all the SSL, it's doing all of that stuff. The AVR is really just controlling everything.
So is the firmware custom on the modem module as well? Is it?
No, off the
both,
shelf.
Off the shelf, and they're both. Is it two separate pieces of firmware, one for the Arduino and one for the modem, or is the modem software is as it is?
Yeah, the modem is as it is. You buy it straight from wherever you buy it from and plug it in. One of the things
if you get it on this sort of ESP32, you don't have to plug it in at all. But anyway, moving on swiftly, yeah.
Oh,
you really want an ESP32, don't you?
Did I mention the ESP32s? Did I mention that?
Not only, Gary is right, because for instance, on ArduPilot, we already have the interfaces and we can drive serial modems quite easily. So it would be a very smooth porting of the code to ArduPilot.
Let's not forget. I see Malika Jan. You're gonna have to email me, and you're gonna have to tell me how to pronounce your name, and I'm gonna have to try and get it right every week. Then, but if you're using RGPilot, you can already use Altitude Angel and Mission Planner. It's already there. It's been there for a long time. And you can see their airspace information that they crack in. And he mentioned price earlier. Is this a bait and switch, Richard? Are you going to get us all fit in these, and then it's going to cost us a fortune?
No, and even if we did do that at some nefarious point in the future, it's an open source project, so you could just go and do whatever you want with it. So you can always point it somewhere else. But I think it's really good to clarify that there are lots of different things that Altitude Angel does from a service perspective for various different life cycles in the flight. So you mentioned that we're in Mission Planner. That's for a supply of our airspace and our ground hazard data, which is really useful sort of pre-flight when you're on the ground, you're looking where you want to fly, and even in flight to a degree. But actually, one of the reasons we built Scout, as I said earlier, was really to talk back to the vehicle, and that's because as you fly, we're relaying that position of your drone off to our UTM, and then kind of mixing it with all of the other drones, all of the other aviation traffic surveillance that we see, monitoring things like NOTAMs and temporary flight restrictions and even severe weather events, and then providing navigation assistance back to the pilot so that you can avoid those either in real time, i.e. directly by executing some instruction on the drone, or by popping up an alert on the ground control for the pilot to react to, a bit like a TCAS system would. So again, we're not really, one of our goals at Altitude Angel was to say, look, we've solved a bunch of really complicated problems that are blockers typically to doing more with drones, but not really to tell you how to implement those in your solutions for your specific use case, which is why we publish all of the documentation for all of these services so that you can take them and then embed them in, directly in Arduino, I've just forgotten the name of the controller we talked about, ArduPilot, sorry. Do it directly on board, or do it in another flight controller, or build your own system, or relay it through the ground station. And actually, I think that's something we haven't spoken about here, Rupert, is the ability actually to have effectively multiple channels with the Scout project. So the Scout device is associated with your Altitude Angel login. But in a very, very near-term release, I think it's slated for kind of mid-June, you'll be able to subscribe to the telemetry from that Scout device from your ground station. So you can relay that telemetry over a long distance through the cellular network and pull that back to the ground station or multiple ground stations, which is really useful if you start building kind of swarm-based, drone swarms, effectively, when you want to get all of that telemetry back for a relatively low cost. So, there's a lot that you can already do with Scout, and to be fair, it's just getting started. And, all of you guys have demonstrated one of the great reasons we wanted to get it out. We could have waited a year, put in support for the famous ESP32 or whatever it is we wanted to do. But we wanted to get it out there because it's prompted a discussion, right?
Yep.
Quite often these devices are almost held up as the holy grail in BV loss, etc., but they're actually not. They're a pathway, a bit like the mobile phone, right? With a mobile phone, you can do deals that are worth billions of dollars, but the mobile phone itself isn't doing that for you. It's just a channel. And that's what we wanted here, was a mechanism where the UTM actually had a reliable communications channel and an independent source of position information to connect the drone to a wider kind of navigation and aviation system. And that's kind of the first steps that Scout is taking here.
So basically, we are trying to how are we going to retrofit those drones that will be illegal in 2 years, like a lot of the DJI stuff? How would we plug in such system to a DJI, say a Mavic Pro, which does not provide an easily reachable position control and all of that stuff? Would we have a special system with its own GPS integrated that you would?
Who knows, right? I think, as Rupert suggested earlier, it's just kind of getting started, and anything is really possible with this. Again, it's not necessary to have the Scout hardware. You can actually, if you have a, kind of like an app-controlled drone or a similar ground station in the loop, you can actually perform all of the same functions that Scout is providing by relaying, from your local range, short-range radio link to the drone, relaying that through to the cloud anyway. So that's still possible, but it's also equally possible that those regulations, whatever they may be, on whatever they may become in different territories around the world. From our perspective, this is more really around sort of industrial and commercial use of drones, less about consumer use of drones for that kind of hardware requirement. We're talking cargo drones, UPS, FedEx style vehicles traveling between airports, and research vehicles, search and rescue, etc. So, the regulation side of things and what that's going to require and what that's going to entail is definitely still going to be an evolving conversation. But what we've done here is give our regulators all around the world another thing to look at and another thing to consider, because again, it's really important that, the one or two quote unquote vertical solutions that exist out there, which require a specific device and a specific UTM and a specific paid subscription, are not the only solutions. And it was, again, going back to that grassroots, what started the drone ecosystem, it wasn't the big corporations, right? It was the makers and the hackers and the builders. I think those people are the people that can help to solve the very problems that we're looking at now. And I think that's the really exciting part about Scout, because it is, it is decidedly a bit of hardware, but we've deliberately said that's not proprietary, that's not ours, that belongs to the community, and that's what we're looking to enhance and to build. And we'll help out with the governance. We'll make sure that it's built to a robust standard, just like the rest of our software. We'll make sure that there's a good structure for inviting contributions, etc. And we're even open to suggestions on how we manage that. And until we are inundated with this problem of too many pull requests, we don't really know how best to approach that. So we're waiting for the community really to kind of step up and do what it wants us to do, which is tell us, what it needs, tell us how we can help, and tell us what services are missing, as well as what its concerns are. Because, as I said, we are taking Scout on a road trip to various different regulators, starting in the UK, and then trying to go through a process of understanding how can that work, how can that be appropriate for drones, how could that potentially be useful in GA, so on and so on. The list goes on. And yes, that is a fantastic question. And the answer to that is yes, that's why we built it. In fact, we have two services available today. One is public and one is private. And I'll tell you a little bit about the private one because it's tantalizingly exciting. And I like to as Gary tries to trip me up routinely, tries to get me to tell you things that I'm not allowed to tell you yet. But I'm only breaking our own secrets here, not anyone else's. So we have two services today. One is called Strategic CRS, Strategic Conflict Resolution Service, which is effectively a mechanism for understanding where you're planning to fly and when, and then helping you not to plan to fly into anyone else that we know about ahead of time. So it's kind of flight plan exchange, but a little bit more than that. And then we have tactical CRS, which is the exact opposite. It's all in response to a real-time or a near real-time position. And what tactical CRS is doing is effectively deconfliction or traffic collision avoidance. Now, you won't ever see us going to capitalize those words because, you know, that no UTM, no remote service can see everything in the sky. So it's very much a supplemental service for helping. But if you think about the use cases that we built that solution for, initially you have lots of corporates flying lots of drones of their own, you know, in and around a facility, and they want to make sure that there's some governance around that to make sure that they don't come within specific parameters of each other. You also have some really interesting work going on in urban aerial mobility, where you get folks who are building fleet management but not really thinking about the traffic management side of things. And again, at Altitude Angel, we've always been really focused on that underlying fabric, you know, kind of saying, okay, well, if we're going to have millions of autonomous drones or semi-autonomous and human-piloted drones as we go forwards, we need new infrastructure. You know, the current aviation systems of the world don't have the kind of infrastructure in place to support all of this. So you need a service like Tactical CRS to help the air traffic control systems cope with that volume. Because what we don't want are bottlenecks in this great journey of progress that you lot and everyone else watching has started. You know, we absolutely now need to accelerate that. So we went out and solved a lot of those really complicated problems of, you know, aggregating lots of different telemetry and performing multiplexing and understanding the different resolutions in data, bringing it all together, and then giving the makers, the hackers, the commercial airframe manufacturers, and we got some very big manufacturers actually using the Tactical CRS service in beta at the moment, so that they can implement all of that stuff in a really simple way and get the right result. Because that's one of the great things the API gives us, is the ability to control effectively the behavior in that system. So as long as you implement it as we've described, you'll get the same result that we're describing. And that's a really magical thing from a software perspective, because you don't have to invest millions of dollars solving the same problems that have been solved by us and with the community. So yeah, that was a great question.
Just a quick question. If we will be needing mobile connection, so we'll be needing a contract with a provider. Do you guys have in your plans to get some kind of worldwide provider like the Kindle had with its mobile plan on board? So they have a worldwide contract with several providers that you could go anywhere in the world and your Kindle would always have connectivity. Because if we are going to extend this, so if you go from one country to the other, you might get a nasty surprise with roaming charges. So if you guys are planning some kind of agreement like Amazon did with worldwide providers.
In a nutshell, no, but let me expand on that a little bit, because again, we're coming at this from a point of view where we want to create the capability. It's up to our implementers to decide, you know, ultimately how they establish a connection to our service or to any other. So cellular is one. You would have seen very recently we did an announcement about the kind of space-based UTM aspect. So we have a lot of our customers who aren't using, you know, kind of good high bandwidth, low latency cellular. They're using low bandwidth, high latency satellites. You know, it's up to our implementers to decide the solution that's best for them. Although I will just caveat that by saying the number of people that have actually come to us and said, it would be really great if A, we could just click buy on this device, and B, you could set up an airtime contract for us. Rupert kind of touched on that, the airtime aspect a little bit earlier as well, in that a lot of mobile telecoms companies aren't very supportive of having sort of flying SIM cards on the basis that it can create interference, and there are legislations around that in different countries, etc. Others are much less concerned about that because they have different protections in place on their network. So the idea of a universal flying sim sounds great, but then probably the amount of commercial problems we'd have to try and solve with that initially versus the number of people who would actually take a drone around the world on a world tour and need to fly it in that way, it's probably quite small at the moment. So, you know, we're definitely keeping an ear to the ground on that. And you know what? If you put it on Scout and tell us it's really important, and you go in there and it gets enough upvotes, we'll go figure out how to make that happen, because that's what we do. We listen to what people are telling us they need. So, but that's, you know, certainly our current position is, you know what, we wanted to get a mechanism out there to demonstrate how easy it can be to connect a vehicle into a UTM, but then secondarily to have the UTM connect back to the vehicle or the ground station controller, because that, to our knowledge, we haven't seen any real kind of credible solutions that do that for anything other than just kind of plotting the location of the drone on a map. That's not really what we're about. And if you want that, RGPilot and Mission Planner already do that, right? There are much better solutions than Scout for that, and frankly cheaper. So if you want to go BVLOS and you want to start solving some of the challenges that the regulator will throw at you, like how are you going to sense aircraft near you? How are you going to be able to convince me as the regulator that you're not going to smash into the other drones? You're going to react to that air ambulance that's coming through. You're going to know about NOTAMs as you fly. That's what we're starting to do here. We're starting to lay the foundations for getting that out and turning that over to the community to now tell us what's wrong with that. What else do you need? How do we polish this? So yeah, honestly, it's quite exciting for us to be in that position to have kind of just turned this over sort of cathartically, I think, Rupert as well, because Rupert's put so much of his time and energy and passion into bringing Scout to fruition. You know, now we're kind of saying, right, okay, we're going to take a step back for a couple of weeks and see what happens here. But you know, we've already had quite a lot of large corporates and commercial airframe manufacturers come forward and say, right, you know, either we want to make these devices or we want to have the Scout capability in our own devices, and that's a really interesting prospect.
So I got two questions I was going to ask. First of all, Rupert, so have you guys seen the ASTM standard yet, obviously, for this? Because as part of it, there's no requirement for it to actually hook up into the aircraft. Basically, as long as it is able to take GPS, provide heading data, and, you know, the basic stuff we can do on the sensors these days, it doesn't have to go into the aircraft. But have you got the ASTM standard yet? Have you guys started looking at? You started going through because obviously it's not. It's funny. They want this open, yet the standard itself isn't actually open, which is a slight annoyance. And it's not particularly cheap, is it? I don't know how much it is. It's about 80 quid, I think it is.
It's $75 a standard, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the irony with it. Which I did find. I haven't had a chat. I keep looking to go, shall I spend 80 quid on this? But no, it's not something. It's weird.
It's a riveting read.
True story though. Patrick and I were on the original ASTM meetings, and as soon as they said it was going to be $75 a standard, we left. What's the point? What's the point of being on that? Anyway,
I wait for someone to leak it online, but
yes.
But no, look, to be fair, you guys have put out there an open source piece of hardware to the community. You've provided software, and Richard's trying to explain how he's not an evil UTM trying to take over the world, as he always does, and quite successfully as well. That, you know, we can't trust you, Richard. You can't trust him. Sorry, but we're not allowed to trust. No, to be fair, it's great to see what Altitude Angel are doing here. You know, I'd like to see a broadcast ID hat for this, an element to give people the option for both. You know, I love the open source part of it. There is an element that this is really interesting, and actually some of the stuff you've touched on I hadn't even thought of. The fact that if we had this hooked up via Mavlink to an autopilot, that data can be sent back to the cloud, and then you guys can provide us that data via a web portal, and that's very interesting in itself, because there isn't universal ways of doing that. It's doable, but there isn't universal ways of doing it at the moment. Although the part about it still comes down to, with the UTM aspect of people providing their data. Is that data going to be open? Is it going to be accessible? But at the end of the day, that isn't down to you guys. Legislation has decided this data must be available for everyone, and so far, so be it. Will this then have like a web interface for updating? Because there's going to be some configuration with this, with regards to your remote. Within the ASTM standard, we've got to put your operator ID in. Serial number will be the serial number of the unit. So there's certain things that it has to comply with, isn't there, on that side of it?
There is, and so at the moment the user interface side of things is very rudimentary. It's mostly about the device pairing, and at the moment we also haven't provided a user accessible way of people adding their own device IDs in there, largely because we didn't want to kind of have a free-for-all and people nicking other people's IDs. We wanted to be involved in that loop. The IDs for devices at the moment are based on IMEI numbers on the SIM card.
Is that ASTM? Are they ASTM compatible? Because obviously the standard has certain requirements around the serial number and IDs, doesn't it?
So my understanding of the standard, I'm still absorbing it. It's not the most riveting read. That particular data doesn't actually have to go in a network ID format. That particular data doesn't have to go from the device to the network service provider, but it has to be available from the person reading the network service provider. So long as we, Altitude Angel, have got that alongside the fact that we know that that's your device and that the device was used on that air.
So you would link it in the background to the IMEI. Yeah, okay.
Which you kind of won't actually do through the provisioning portal anyway, right? Because you sign in with an AA ID to your portal, and then we know who you are, your profile, etc.
Yeah.
But Rupert is absolutely right. There's a lot of work we've got to do on the provisioning interface for that. Yeah, it's, again, as we said in the kind of README docs, which I'm not sure you've got to, because I think we buried it in there somewhere. That at the moment, this is about getting started, and it's designed not for folks who want an off-the-shelf solution. It's for the folks that have soldering irons and 3D printers who want to roll up their sleeves, or an engineering background and say, right, I'm gonna put the time in, understand how this works, and then make it my own, and then tell these guys what I need them to do for me. That's kind of what we're hoping for there.
Yeah, and available on AliExpress. I was just checking, so you guys have a head start.
Where do you think I got ours from? And the other thing I was just thinking as well, we're very conscious that it's quite likely that if an organization had a number of Scout devices, you want to be able to move the Scout device you'd either permanently fix it to an aircraft, or you'd want to be able to move them around aircraft and move them around pilots. Yeah. So again, one of our challenges from a provisioning point of view that we have yet to sort is being able to make that easy.
Yeah, because someone actually asked in the comments, and I'll touch on that now. Within the European standard, there's nothing to say it has to be a separate device per aircraft with regards to a retrofit. Obviously, with an aircraft that will be sold under the compliance scheme, it will comply with its own individual serial number. From a retrofit point of view, the serial number will be the serial number of your device, which is your remote ID device. Therefore, your compliance, that device could be on any aircraft. I've not seen any requirement for the aircraft to be type and model to be made specifically aware in the retrofit aspect of it. It's simply about the device, where it is and who it is, and the device is telling you who it is, basically.
Yeah, and for me, those standards are focused on finding out who is responsible for something flying in the sky. It's
that thing isn't that relevant, is it? As part of
I think it's more from the enforcement angle, right? Is where that requirement has appeared, because you do have the occasional rogue drone, and that's driving the I guess the regulatory requirement to try and solve that problem. Of course, rogue drones, if you're really intent on doing damage, you're not going to carry your remote ID transponder, right? But the problem is.
Wrap it in foil.
It's like that box on the US Customs declaration forms. Have you ever seen it? You go through it. I am not a terrorist. It's like, well, okay. Then I'm not sure who that box is for. But if you tick that seems like a bad thing to tick, right? But anyway, getting back to the point here.
Have you actually done that, Bruce?
He did
Yeah,
build
they
a
said
missile. He built a missile.
I did, yeah. Actually, just while I remember, I've got a question here. Now, we're talking about putting a cellular modem, 4G modem, on a drone in very close proximity to a GPS receiver and very close proximity to a lot of other sensitive electronics. Have you done any field studies to make sure that this is not going, if you slap it on top of a Phantom 4 or a Mavic, what is it going to do when you start broadcasting a 4G signal? What's it going to do to the associated electronics? Is that going to be an issue? And what if people are already using a cellular link for their C2? How is this going to integrate?
It's a good question, and it's definitely something we need to look at in more detail. As you said, this is about starting something. We have put a device on a drone, admittedly rather limitedly given the current circumstances, but we want to do more testing, right? That's exactly what this is all about.
The point. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
and again, the interesting thing is you have conversations with regulators about what you should be building and how you should be building it. And in the absence of standards, what you typically don't get is a bar that you need to hit that's kind of transparent. It says, it must be insulated against this type of interference, et cetera, et cetera. Usually you have to come up with some kind of mystical solution that the regulator can then say that is safe enough. So, you go through this process where you present IDEA version 1, and then they'll show you all the problems they've found with IDEA version 1. So you go back and come back with IDEA version 2 and say, well, I've met all of those. Is this safe enough? And then there'll be another round, and you just keep going and going and going until no one can say anymore, no. And then it's safe enough. But the problem is, in the absence of that kind of testing, you get, I think, a lot of industry lobbying coming in and saying, well, that's what we're going to do. That's good enough. And that's not necessarily the right thing. And again, that's one of the reasons we were dead keen to get Scout into the world, to show that, again, it doesn't have to be expensive and it definitely doesn't have to be proprietary. And actually, even when those two conditions are met, it can still do more than just this shouty transmitter device that you kind of, Velcro to a drone. Why isn't it a useful device? We're going to be potentially requiring people to stick these bits of hardware to their drones at potentially some reasonable cost. But what do you get as a pilot for doing that, other than the nice feeling that you're complying with the rules? You don't get any new services, right? You don't get your job made easier. It's certainly not safer for you as the pilot. And it's certainly not safer for folks on the ground, unless we're all running around with a short-range transmitter or a receiver, rather, to kind of dodge all these millions of drones that might be there in 5 years' time. So it's an interesting thing that this remote ID standard is all about right now. But again, for us, it's more about the network side of things for commercial and industrial use, where that makes much more sense.
So why didn't you think about using an ESP32 with the modem and a LoRa transmitter on it? So that, with an 868 LoRa transmitter as well on the board, you could get out to Open Glider Network and FLARM then at the same time.
So you should say that, Gary. I was thinking the same thing, because if you look at the Open Glider Network and that, it's got worldwide coverage. It's everywhere. And you could utilize an existing infrastructure very easily, and there's no cost to transmitting on LoRa other than the capital cost.
Gary, this is for you, my friends. I bought this for this moment. I'm unboxing this line. I can't open it. Actually, I've broken the seal. Don't worry.
Well, I heard you. I heard
those child craft containers.
I didn't think you were allowed scissors at altitude. You must be alone. I saw you down.
Plastic scissors.
Do you recognise this, Gary?
I do.
That's your my mother.
This is your lesser cousin. This is the ESP8266.
Yeah.
It's the poorer cousin of the ESP32.
It is. So again, we don't need power. We don't need really that much power for what we're doing with Scout, right? It's relaying position and interpreting commands back from the UTM. So it can be really low compute power to do that. And because it's low compute power, it's also low power consumption, which is pretty good.
So we have to wait for the variations that will come from AliExpress of the world, right?
Yeah. It won't be long before they appear, I'm sure. But we've experimented with lots of hardware. This is a micro Arduino. This is a nice little stack. This was one of the early prototypes, and these are quite cool because, again, you have these different layers that you can pull on and pull off. So there's a battery module, a USB module, a GPS module, but way too much power for what we really need.
Well, yeah, but then you can
And also
nice
really
small
difficult
ESP32 like this with a screen, so you can have your GPS on it and everything.
This,
You have all your
this was another one. So this is a AI Thinker A9, which
But
has
it's
got
really it's the LoRa module, and to get FLARM or Open Glider Network on there, that I think would be
So the cool
interesting
thing
as well.
is Rupert's got
And
an
then
upgrade.
sorry, Rich,
wait,
I just want to butt in. I'm going to butt in and say, because then what you could do, because you've got the telemetry module on there, is you could also retransmit all those glider position you'd be seeing into your system, and you could pull them into your UTM with. You could see over the once the RPAS is airborne, you can see over the horizon OGN stuff and FLARM stuff.
You got it. And Rupert's got an upgrade coming. So Rupert and Co has the upgrade coming later in June, where we'll take the I2C bus on board and open that protocol up. So if you've got a receiver of some description, whether it's picking up ADSB or something in the lower range for Open Glider Network, then you can pick that up, put it on the I2C bus, which is, again, we could have been much more complicated and gone for a different type of interface, but pretty much everyone understands I2C and can use it, and there are libraries for it. So you could then relay that to the same, or to your chosen UTM or to your chosen service provider. But I think to date, I'm not sure on this, but I think we're the only guys that have all the different flight stage APIs open and available, including the CRS services. So if you're interested in doing some funky traffic management stuff for yourself, or what we, effectively, go read that documentation. There are two modes for that service. One is local, i.e. just your drones. The other is what we call global, which is everything we can see. So in order to get access to that data, you've got to share your data with everyone else. It's fair, right? You can't just peep, you've got to share. But equally, if you are proprietary and you want to go, listen, it's
yeah, no, I can't unthink that now.
Richard doesn't do peeping.
No.
Share and share alike. I think that's the Creative Commons way.
All you have to say is something about a car park, and then it would have been.
oh no!
Is that my broadband giving up? I think it is.
Oh, there you go. Look at that. Oh,
Yeah.
that looks like a lovely. That looks like it's. But that's the old 800L. I got a whole bucket of them.
You want 808?
To cellular modem. So case solves.
Has that got the LoRa module as well?
No.
Oh, I'll find one with a LoRa module as well.
Gary's
Then we're
not
done.
Or it's like this big ITC. That's fine.
So what? So the modem you've chosen is what's the modem you've chosen at the moment?
I don't know. I just googled ESP32 with cellular.
Yeah, that's the new one. The 800Ls. We use those in the animal collars. You can't get them down to. They use a lot of power when they're sleeping. We don't like those so much. But you want the new one.
They won't be sleeping while they're flying. That's when you need them.
Yeah, I know. I know.
So,
I'll see.
that's only when you have one of these showing your watering of your garden.
I'm going to see if I've got one for a collar here. I'm sure I've got one. Got a collar. I don't know.
ESP32 collar.
So is it the 7100 you're using?
Yeah.
Standard. Is it okay? I'm just trying to see what the cost of that is running out at the moment.
So I pick that up for about £45 off AliExpress or Banggood or something.
Yeah, is it the PCIe one you're using with the board? Is it or
no? There's a dev kit one which is really tiny.
This got a Cortex processor on it, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. It's an ARM Cortex.
Yeah. So I'm surprised you can't do everything with that. No, I mean, look, it's a great idea, and it's the sort of thing we've got to get behind. It's the sort of thing IMASL has got to consider what its stance on all this sort of thing is, whether it hates it, loves it, or it's going to get behind something. But it does. At the end of the day, we've all got to start pushing back at the regulator. Might be the wrong way of putting it, but at least informing the regulator from a wider knowledge base, rather than just we've stood up a company with VC money and we're going to try and chuck this at them and convince them it's right sort of a way. I'm
I think
ranting
generally,
again, aren't
right,
I?
a lot of the regulators we've spoken to are just, remarkably smart, interested, passionate people, right? But the problem is they're very busy, and they're lobbied, and there are lots of different things, and they're not necessarily technical experts, right? They're there to manage risk and understand that particular angle of it, which is something that actually a lot of inventors and hackers and makers don't understand. So it's only through sort of that collaboration that you get to, you first got to educate, and actually it's a two-way thing. So you have to be educated by the regulator to understand what the concerns are before you can understand how to mitigate that in hardware and then firmware, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's a really dynamic set of conversations going on out there, but without choice, then the regulators can only go in one direction, right? And that's what we've got to do. That's what I think, one of Altitude Angel's primary goals here is to bring balance into a conversation which is otherwise quite skewed at the moment.
You've got to talk a lot about risk, yet we don't see those risk assessments, do we?
What risk assessments?
Risk analysis is essential to managing risk, but we don't see the risk analysis. We don't see the risk assessments. It's all done like it's, gut feeling, knee-jerk reaction management of risk, because the risk hasn't been quantified or scoped adequately to come up with a reasonable result, which is why we've got all this wonderful overreaching regulation in some areas of the unmanned aviation industry.
I mean, maybe you're right. I mean, that could be an angle of it, right? But again, maybe, and I'm not defending anybody here on the tech side or the regulator side, but maybe regulators are doing, the software open source equivalent that Altitude Angel is doing right now, and going, right, I've got to start somewhere, and then I'm gonna put the stick in the stand, and then you guys are going to have to come move it, because right now, as a regulator, I think this is safe enough, and then we've got to go and give them something that gives them something more. So I think, there's all sorts of things that are possible. I think certainly in the earlier days, when I started the company, five-ish years ago now, a lot of the discussions were very knee-jerky, right? And they were certainly coming from a position of, I would say, less knowledge and less knowledgeability about drones and how they work. And I remember having a very heated debate with someone in government a long time ago on the security side of things, where they were absolutely convinced that to protect an airport from attacks of drones, then all we had to do is deploy RF sensors around the airport, because all drones emit RF. To which we were trying to point out, well, no, it's not necessary that there is going to be a two-way link between the drone and the pilot. If I was going to do something like this, and you get into really dangerous territory by imagining where you'd go if you were trying to solve this problem. But again, I think, like all things, the regulations side of things are on an evolving ecosystem, and it's just on a different timescale to the one that technology likes to run at. So that's why I think you've got a lot of these companies trying to ram, as Gary, I think, eloquently said, all this VC money down regulators' faces. But I don't know if you noticed, it's not really working. Certainly the UTM companies don't have what they want, and the drone operators don't have what they want. Instead, what we're getting is something that no one really wants, and we've got to do better. Together, we've got to fix it.
Have you gone with 4G rather than 5G because you don't want the COVID spreading?
He went there. Yeah, be careful, Richard.
An order now on YouTube.
Yeah. We didn't want flying COVID devices, did we? Yeah.
No. I think it's very good. I'm going to build one myself. I'm going to build one up and set it on fire, break it, or do something which I usually do.
Yeah, it won't last long. If he makes it, won't last long.
Well, I'm forward thinking. I'm going to build one. I'm building one with a Threadripper. I think I'll use a Threadripper for my processor, and it will require something more than 18650.
I'm going to build it and overclock it. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, with twin graphics cards. That's what it.
I think that should do it. That should just about do it, and you should definitely power that off of your 600 milliamp hour battery.
And it'll all be sub 250 grams, so it won't even be needed.
Is there STL files on there? Is there STL files on there as well, Rich? I just missed that for the case. Is there an STL?
Yeah, there is.
Good.
An awesome viewer for the 3D STL cases as well. So, Rupert, you actually made one, didn't you, on your?
I did, printer? Yeah. It's early prototype. This one doesn't fit, but doesn't fit the new PCB. But yeah, made a one out with my 3D printer.
What colour should we do it in? I will print one for tomorrow. Let's have
Right,
a look.
orange. Always a
Girly pink.
I have got this. Might suit you, Richard. I have this very nice purple, which also has
Yes.
fleck in it as well. So
Yeah,
we're
Nick
making
went out of
that.
that.
In fact, if we can dazzle, have a reflective effect on the flying device, then it will act as a beacon in the sky.
Yeah.
No, I will. I'm going to start one this week. It's a little thing we can put together. I just got to try and find the modem. I'm struggling to find it. I found loads of them, but not the dev kit. Is it a little square one? Is it
The
little
square one, yeah.
Yeah, is it the square one with the header pins on the
Square one with 7 header pins, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, cool.
If you only had a decent camera, we could actually see.
We could
it
have seen
there.
that, yeah.
Yeah, we could have seen that. Yeah.
Before we joined, it was showing me the microscope view, and it would have been great. But apparently, StreamYard doesn't like Rupert said.
I blame StreamYard.
Yeah, well, very likely.
I'm
I'm going to wait till Elon. I'll wait till Elon gets more satellites up there, and I will use Wi-Fi.
Yeah, are we gonna? Let me just share this a second, Gary. Sorry, I'm
Oh,
assuming.
Well, we'll see if we can. Yeah, give it a go.
I've lost the page. Where's it gone? Is it this? That one there? Is it that?
Hang on. Hang.
Careful, not the Pornhub tab.
Yes, I didn't look before I put that up.
Oh, that's so small, I can't see it.
You can't see it, can you?
Hold on.
It's 7100. Yeah, 7100E. That's it.
It's that board there, is it?
That looks like it, yeah.
Okay, cool.
That looks like a very dodgy copy of it, though.
Yeah, it's on Alibaba, so whatever that is. So, yeah.
Yeah. These sort of things have to happen. Yeah, I'm surprised it's not a protocol that couldn't come down from the air-to-air radios and jump through Mission Planner and jump off to you. That's still the wrong one, Louis. 7100, isn't it? Still the wrong one.
So the fun part as well is if you wanted to take the feeds that we do have, the surveillance data we do have now, so things like the ADS-B feeds, etc., you can pull all of that down through our APIs into your ground station today. You don't need Scout or anything funky to do that. That's available. You just tell us where you're flying, and we'll give you back all the telemetry that we have in your vicinity. And of course,
Does that cost us money?
Sorry, say that again.
Does that cost us money?
No, sir. It does not cost you monies.
I don't understand how you make any money. But anyway.
I'll have 2 then.
Yeah, I'll have a dozen.
Right, yeah.
I don't know. I think we're pretty good at keeping it a secret. I don't know why, but drone pilots are not our business model. We're not interested in the drone pilot making money from the drone pilots. That's not what we feel is appropriate. I know that there's certainly a bit of a gold rush out there, I think, for companies that are queuing up to try and squeeze money from pilots. But again, that's not what Altitude Angel is invested in.
So, Richard, for the benefit of those who are not aware of Altitude Angel, you are currently you're on the country that fell off the end of Europe, weren't you, with Brexit? You're in the UK, but do your services extend beyond Europe and the UK? Can people in America build this thing and use it in the USA?
Yeah. So again, we have I think it's about a third of our user base worldwide is in the US at the moment, but we are predominantly very, very popular in Europe. And for the while that it includes England and the UK, then yes, still here as well in Europe. Every service we have is available in every country that we operate. So I think today we have data, and Rupert will correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure, in about 90 odd countries and growing. So if you want to understand where it is safe and legal to fly at the moment that you go fly, then you can do that effectively on dronesafetymap.com, or if you're a maker, an integrator, a vendor, or a software developer, you can go get the same data and implement it however you see fit in your own solutions from our developer platform. In a
country like New Zealand, where our airways, our air traffic control people, want to launch their own UTM and making lots of noise about it. If we mobilised the forces here in New Zealand, everyone with a model and a drone built a Scout and stuck it on, we could basically force their hand, couldn't we?
I think it's an interesting model, right? New Zealand is certainly paving the way, shall we speak, in terms of state state sort of focused UTM. But I think it's a crazy idea to assume that there will be only one, and certainly that may be only one operated by an ANSP. There's a lot of airspace that ANSPs aren't regulated to cover. For example, in our wonderful UK here, it's about 7% of the airspace that extends down to the ground that's controlled, that would affect a drone. So there's a lot of airspace that's not, right? So the solutions are not necessarily directly portable. And again, solving the USSP side, which is the operator side, is one aspect. Solving the management side, on the other hand, and the integration side, so that the market doesn't get siloed, so that people actually have a choice. That, I think, is how we should be progressing, because that's how aviation has evolved, right? We don't have a sky above us that says, well, only Boeing can fly in it. If you meet the requirements, knock yourself out. You can build a homebrew aircraft. As long as you meet those requirements, you can go build a kit aircraft. So the sky should be open, it should be accessible, and it shouldn't be prohibitively expensive for people to get access to it either. That's our view. But different countries reserve the right to do whatever those countries want. But you're right. I do think there's an element
red card for Richard. Red card is common sense. You know, common sense is banned on this. You know it's banned, Richard. Red card. We can't have common sense on this.
I'll do better next time.
No, come on. He has to say the common sense and then the magic words. He has to have AI and blockchain.
And big data. Yeah. We forgot big data there.
Big data.
AI, blockchain, big data. Yes, I mean, the number of times we get questions like, does your UTM support blockchain? Thanks for the random question. You might as well have said, does it work on electrons? Why would somebody ask you that?
So, but in New Zealand, I see, Bruce, you're closing down 30-odd airfields because of the current situation. Your air service navigation provider.
Yeah, they're really knocking back the level of people in towers and things and reducing those services. So, because of course we're supposed to have a lower amount of air traffic, so it shouldn't be required. And although domestically air travel is getting pretty much back to normal because it's got this level 2, and we may be going down to level 1 if we get 2 periods of no new cases. But of course, the real missing link is the external tourism, the traffic that generates. So we are definitely a lot lighter. There's not so many aircraft in the air. I've seen very few planes flying over here.
And I suppose, really, so if we were to fit this device, Scout, to an aircraft, it's probably because we are going to operate commercially or BVLOS, or we've got a really, really good reason to be seen by a UTM and know what's happening, because we'd probably be in the centre of town. But when we're out of town with our model aircraft, I think what people won't know is you could also, you wouldn't necessarily need to have this device, because you can notify that flight into Altitude Angel via the app and say, I'm here. And as long as Altitude Angel is feeding, correct me if I'm wrong here, as long as you're feeding the air service navigation provider, they'll know that model aircraft's flying from that time to that time in that area. Sort of. Did I get that all wrong?
And that's me. Sorry, Richard. That's me trying to get cell coverage somewhere in the world. So it's quite hard to work with your system.
Oh, I see. Yes.
I was going to say, Louis, you're never going to hear him from there. Whoever's on the phone, you're doing it. You're doing phones. To Gary's point, you're sort of definitely halfway, maybe possibly there. If there is an ANSP and they're using our software, and the user is given permission for that data to be shared, we'll share it with the ANSP. If you're accessing services that the ANSP has specifically created in a region of airspace, and you want to access those services, then you are effectively asking the ANSP to see you. But more importantly, without the ANSP in the loop still, you can share your flights, and we will anonymize them, and we won't show the flight path, but we'll show the kind of the containing area, and we'll share that with everyone in the vicinity that wants to see it as well. So you can actually get that now I think it's in Mission Planner already. When you move the map in Mission Planner, if we know about a drone flight, you'll get a little circle that will show other Mission Planner users or other AA users or any of our customers and their users, etc. So it's a great way to just get a little bit more situational awareness than you might otherwise have. And it isn't just about, standing in a busy city. Air ambulances cross fields. Are the drones operate near there? And actually, if you're working in research, you probably have a bunch of drones flying around a campus, and you might just want to implement services that stop you crashing your incredibly expensive, 8-month projects into each other over your own airspace. There are lots of reasons to want to use a third-party service to help out with some of that stuff, and we hope that kind of paints a picture about some of them.
And then, so to recap then, as a model aircraft flyer or commercial drone user, I could use the Scout device or your services in another way for the price of completely free.
Yes, correct. If you want to go share your drone flights with others, again, you're contributing to better safety at that point, and that for us is a prime, almost the prime directive, right?
I don't mean to laugh at you, but come on, how are you ever going to make any money? You're doing this wrong.
And
I know
Richard,
was using that phone wrong.
And the data you are collecting from users' flights, what is the score with that data?
So you own it, right? We're very clear about that. And actually, our privacy policy, there is one, and it is written in English, as in plain English for people to read. I know that because I worked very hard with our lawyers to make it readable by anyone that can read and speak English. It's not in jargon, and it basically suggests that data that is ours, Outside Angels, is ours, and we'll share it with you, and you have a license for that. And data that is yours stays yours. And the only time that we will change that is if you try to access a service that you've asked us to send it to someone else. So, typically the most most frequent request we get is, I've sent you all my flight plans. Are you going to give it all over to the police or to the state? And the answer is, well, no, not without a warrant. And we've actually received a few kind of information requests in the past, and we've had to go back and suggest that actually that's a bit broad. You still need to actually supply a reasonable geographic area and a reasonable time frame before we're able to satisfy that request. But we're very clear about how all of that works. But going forwards, when more of this becomes automated, this is where the remote ID stuff really starts to come into it, because network remote ID provides a protection mechanism. I think that the broadcast remote ID doesn't. In this system, in network remote ID, it's possible for anybody to pop along to the UTM and say, I have a concern about that flight, but not know who it is. And it becomes the job of the UTM to relay those concerns to its pilot, to its user, and to broker the communication between the party who's interested and the party who owns the flight data, not to just kind of say, well, here it is.
Richard, within the two things, does it say or suggest? Because you said suggest, they're very different things. So I
thought maybe no one would hear that, but no, it genuinely does, and I encourage you to read it if you're concerned about that.
Just getting you on that one. A question, actually, and I've not seen this. I've dug quite a bit into the US and the UK or EU regulations. Has it been suggested within the standard how long network data should be kept for within the UK and Europe? Because obviously in America, that was 90 days because the network element was part of the original NPRM. However, in Europe, we didn't really have this network element at the start of it, and it's not really been said. So, let's take a pilot uses a system. The flight, how long is that data going to remain in the system for before it's
I'm not really sure we've ever had a good comprehensive answer from a body with authority, either in the UK or across Europe, that can say for us, out of our catalogue of data, which is typically how you do these things. You say, I collect personal data or flight data, and this is how long I retain it, and this is why I retain it. We've never really had a competent answer about what would be appropriate. So we publish our retention policies, but one thing that's not clear is, this whole kind of GDPR aspect in terms of, okay, well, today it's very, very clear cut because, nobody is allowed to go BV loss completely automated without a human in the loop. But let's transport ourselves to say 18 months, 2 years from now, where that becomes slightly more commonplace. What should a UTM do if it's recording telemetry at the time of an incident? And then the UTM receives an EU GDPR right to be forgotten request. Yeah. Should we satisfy that or not? Because telemetry data, I don't think was really conceived of when we were all signing up to GDPR. I think it's a great question that needs to be answered by data protection regulators.
The problem you guys
are trying to take the approach to do what we think is responsible. Protect and safeguard that information at all costs. and make sure it's owned by the people that submit it. I think those are the most reasonable approaches.
The problem is you won't know if that data contains an incident, because it's not like a big red flag comes up and says something went wrong. Do you know what I mean? We've got two elements to this. We've got a pilot who wants to use services that keep the data on your servers, and he's going to pay you for that. That means, or they're going to ask for that, whatever that ends up being, and that's going to be retained. But you're also going to have people who say, right, I will use this service, but I want everything to be the minimum. So I don't want anything else that you offer. I want you to provide my data at the minimum level into what the government has asked us to do. And at what point is that data then tossed away? Is it, and I know in America it was 90 days, which is quite a long period. It was no more or less than 90 days, in fact, in the US.
So I think, certainly on our roadmap, unless there is a regulatory requirement otherwise, we're going to give users the ability to edit their history. We at the moment, we store everything in accordance with the policies that we set out on our website, which generally is up to a 7-year period. But that's not for us and analytical purposes. That's for you, our users, to be able to replay and see your flights, etc. So you can go in, you can delete. To your point, Ian, I think the other aspect there was, you're right, the UTM won't really know if you have kind of something like a flight malfunction and it doesn't quite cause you to crash. But certainly what the UTM might witness is that you go really, really close to another GA aircraft, or you actually do collide with a drone, or whilst you're sending telemetry to us, your flight profile happens to intersect with the ground or a building. So those types of things are absolutely, in theory, possible. And we're trying to understand, what would be the appropriate response.
But that involves processing, or you guys actually processing that, and that's not as simple as receiving and passing it on.
Exactly.
That actually involves data analysis. Your system is then flagging potential issues.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, very broadly speaking, we, as I mentioned earlier, we have those two services called Strategic CRS, which is all about flight plans and upfront planning. In that scenario, we'd have no idea what you actually went and did, and you're not required to tell us. And on the tactical side, if you're using Scout or your own solution, or you're relaying telemetry through something like ArduPilot or Mission Planner, then yes, we would, in theory, be receiving and storing all of this data. But then, we'd have to have some service sat there that then, specifically calls out all of the folks who have had a near miss and then does something with it. And that's not our primary goal at the moment. It's likely that an ANSP or some other quasi-government body in the future may want that service. But again, our job is not really to prescribe what has to happen with that. It's to make sure that the data is available and is controllable by the people who submit it, and that you have visibility into what's happening with it. I think if any of those three things kind of fall away, then you're starting to build a bit of a nefarious system, and that's not something that we want to build. And in fact, we're really clear. Everyone keeps berating us for our business model because you can't figure out how we make money. Again, it's not you guys, it's not operators, it's not the operators themselves, right? It is the ANSPs and the governments who are looking for technical platforms upon which they can create these new infrastructure-based services. And in that regard, we don't prescribe how they use them. We create the capabilities, much like Microsoft create an operating system, but they don't tell you how to use it. We create the operating systems for sort of air navigation 2.0. That's our focus.
It is interesting, and that does open up a whole new world. The data analysis. We've already got software that can tell. You can upload a flight log and it can tell you what's gone wrong, and it's there's certain telltale signs. In ArduPilot, you've got arm and disarm commands, and if the aircraft stops without a disarm command, then the chances are it screwed itself into the ground or something, something like that. So there is always telltale signs that you guys could pick up on, battery voltage changes, things like that. But it then almost becomes a situation of the equipment telling on the pilot without him even knowing, doesn't it? Your equipment is logging an incident that might not have even happened.
I think that's such a good point. And again, I mean, when you're designing an API, right, you can sit down and go, oh, I could have my API collect everything is available, and that's a really common approach in software design. I think we've all seen software products that you downloaded at any point in history, and it's got like a million different text boxes and drop down boxes all on the screen, because the developer's view of a user interface is to expose everything that he or she could possibly collect, rather than try and support the function that they actually need. And our approach to the API design has been to say, well, why don't we just collect what we need to do the job? And Scout could be asking for things like battery life and RSSI and nearby associated cell towers, etc. And it's not at the moment. It's asking for X, Y, and Z effectively, as well as some identity information, so that we can associate that with a Scout device and with you. And again, it comes down to being really transparent in how all of that is being stitched together. And if you ever want to change that, or anyone requires us to change that, it's about telling people about that, so that they have those choices.
He always sounds very good, doesn't he, Gary?
I'm not convinced. I'm still not convinced. No.
I'm not actually real. I'm actually AI, big data, and blockchain.
Do you run on blockchain? Yeah, that's the whole thing. Yeah, it's such a minefield. All of this, really, from so many angles. But I think you've shown that you have services that allow both our model aircraft flying friends and our commercial operators to operate in the clear within a UTM without any cost to them. And we don't need any more than that from Altitude Angel, all of us. It's just about persuading regulators and making these devices and saying, no, well, this is what we want. This is the standard we want. This is the BMFA should be saying, oh, I'll tell you what, we're going to have our members report in like this. Thank you very much, CAA. And the commercial group will say, oh, and by the way, we're going to use these Scout devices to report where our aircraft are. Thank you very much. And that's how it's going to work. don't give them any other option. Or of course you are free to use other options, but they may incur a charge because they're going to charge you for the use of their devices, which they have bought the radio companies or bought into radio companies a couple of years ago for that express purpose, but has so far failed to make it work. Great. Anyway, but yeah.
I can see loads of questions coming in, by the way, but I can't, just so people who are asking them, I can't actually respond to them because I didn't actually log into StreamYard when I joined. So unfortunately, I can't get to your questions, but Gary keeps popping up.
Drone Assist, that's you, isn't it?
That is indeed our app. It's licensed to NATS, and it uses it. Therefore, it's effectively exactly the same data that you get on dronesafetymap.com. It's been coloured a little bit for the guidance that NATS likes to give, and the text that NATS likes to present for different classifications of airspace. But yes, fundamentally, it's the same data underneath. So you've got lots of choice there. Same data you can get in Mission Planner, same data you can get through our APIs as well. And it's free.
So how? So does is this the approved UTM for IMASL, or does there have to be meetings, Bruce?
There will be no UTM. We don't need controlling. We don't need routing and managing. We are self-policing.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is that this is one of the big divides that I think needs to be made, is that do we really need model aircraft and small recreational drones on the radar of air traffic control systems, even UTM systems? I think we're far better off saying that we have designated areas to operate these things, and if they're below a certain size, they don't pose a threat to man or beast. So why introduce complexity and added load to a system that is designed to do other things?
I like it. Bruce, I've got to be honest, right? I really respect that opinion. I personally am not of the view, and although I know different folks in different companies have different views and different regulators, but me personally, I don't think it's appropriate that we track everything everywhere all the time, right? I think there will be a vast majority of air traffic, certainly in the next few years, from a UTM perspective, drone traffic, that the UTM really, it doesn't care about, doesn't need to know about, that can offer nothing to the pilot, right? And that's, for me, is the first test is, do I need something that the UTM can give me in order for me to want to use it? And the answer should be yes. If the UTM can give you something back, then why not use it? You might not need it for the telemetry side. You might not need it for the visibility side. That's just completely distracted me seeing that pop up. But you might not need it for those things, but those are ancillary benefits. But if you want to stand up a parcel delivery service, or send out a fleet of vehicles to go and locate a vulnerable missing person, then you probably do need a UTM service to help interact with that flight, to help keep it safe, to help keep you and others safe on the ground. And I think that's really got to be the choice that is out there. So it'd be interesting to see what happens as we go forwards. And on that last point about flying clubs, etc., there are lots of ways to tackle that. You could, for example, say every flying club member has to stick some kind of device on the drone. You could, or your aircraft. You could do that. Equally, you could put a restricted area or a navigation warning around the flying club. All of those are valid, right? And in an altitude angel, we don't get in there and say, right, okay, that's what you should do. We're saying you have options. You can put it on a map. But what we're saying is not anybody can author our maps. They've got to be authoritative. They've got to come from a source that has a regulatory force behind it. Otherwise, it's pointless. We're selling chunks of the moon at that point. There are loads of companies, I think that originally started that were doing that, right? You could buy a no-fly zone. I did, immediately liken those guys, where you can go and buy a chunk. Literally, you can buy a chunk of the moon, and you can have a hectare of the moon for like $4,000. Great. I mean, okay. But again, what's the point if it doesn't carry that regulatory aspect behind it? If you can't actually be prosecuted by going there, why would we bother to tell you that you can't go there? So I think it's got to be authoritative for people to trust it. And it's not for AA to say what is the right approach. It's simply to say these are the channels. And if you want a no-fly zone today, the only way to get that is to get it into the AIP, right? You can't simply phone us and request it.
Well, are you alluding to a new? Sorry, Bruce, after you.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, I think looking at it pragmatically, in America, they want to bring all the models and the amateurs into this remote ID thing. And I believe it's going to be multi-structured. I think you're going to have various levels of freedom based on what you're prepared to accept. For example, under 250 grams, I mean, it's a toy. It shouldn't be regulated by man nor beast. It's safe.
No.
Oh, no, Gary's.
Falling off.
But if it's under, see, that was under 250 grams, didn't kill anybody. If it weighs less than 250 grams, it's not a threat. The risk is so low that we don't need to regulate these things any more than we regulate other children's toys. If it's over 250 grams, then we've got two options. You can either go with this ID thing, so if you're flying in a public place, you've got the necessary accountability, or you can fly in an area that's been designated for the operation of these things. And some of those areas may even provide more freedoms. I would like to see areas set up which provide for BVLOS, recreational, model and drone flying. So it's an exclusion area for manned aviation, or at least a high risk area where manned aviation can take the choice. Do I take the risk that I'm going to encounter a aircraft being flown beyond visual line of sight? Those things, you set up these multiple tier things so people can then choose the level of operation that suits them. And they may just decide, go sub 250, I can fly anywhere, anytime, I'm not a problem. Or I want a bigger, heavier craft, so I'll either fit remote ID or I will fly in the prescribed areas. That then makes it so much easier from a regulatory management point of view. And at the moment, they're trying to bring everybody under this one umbrella. You've got to have the remote ID. You can't do this, you can't do that. I think that we need to work with the regulators and educate them, because as Richard says, there's some bright people, but I don't think they have the scope and the understanding. Certainly they don't have this understanding of the communities they're dealing with, the psychology of your average drone flyer, your average model flyer. They're probably missing that. They're used to working in an environment where you've got manned aviation, where there is a very rigid thing. You do what you're told, that the rules are there to protect your safety. Those things don't necessarily apply to recreational users. And by trying to apply that psychology, they get in really poor compliance. Just look at what happened in Detroit. I mean, that obviously that didn't work. And that comment that came up on the screen, it's interesting to note, and I put this in the video I put up recently, that I've shown that footage to quite a number of people, the great unwashed, people that don't know about drones. They're not drone or model flyers. And their response hasn't been, oh my goodness, how frightening. It's, well, what a great shot that was. That's a brilliant piece of footage. They seem to be unaware of the risk. But the model flying community and the drone flying community has come out and really bashed that as an action. They said it's incredibly risky, it's unacceptably dangerous. So we have become very self-policing over and above what the public are trying to police us with. So I think there's still too much of a disconnect between the regulators and the needs and the preparedness of the recreational communities to adapt to the regulations they're throwing at them, which is why I've set up this thing here to try and bridge that gap. But to do that, you need to be able to say you're representing enough people, and we need to get the massive people behind us. Hopefully it'll happen. It's just a matter of time will tell, but regulations are only effective when people comply, and there's just not the infrastructure for mandating compliance at this stage. And so the regulations are good ideas, but not necessarily being taken much notice of by people who are the real risk factors. Speaking of real risk factors, here's Gary.
The microphone's muted. What was that? That was we've got a
nothing.
fucking quite a big cat living in the bamboo. It's serval. It's a big thing, and the dogs go nuts. So they just went nuts at the serval.
Real problems.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite big. You see, it's crap. It's huge. Anyway, it's huge. So, did you solve the world while I was gone? I'm sure you managed to solve everything.
Yeah, I sorted it all, Gary. It's all sorted now. There's no problems anymore. Yep. We've made Richard totally redundant in the recreational community.
Well, it's exciting. Look, we're getting on. We've nearly gone. It's been far too interesting. We've gone through 2 hours without even trying. Nearly. We should pick up 507 mentioned that flight. What are we going to say about that Blue Angels flight? Are we going to say anything about that?
We did while you were busy taming the lions.
Fair enough.
I just pointed out that it was an interesting difference in attitude from the great unwashed public who think, wow, what a great shot that is, fantastic, I like it. And those of us who fly models and drones who are outraged and shocked as hell because we realise the dangers involved. So we are actually, if it wasn't for the actions of the drone and model flying community, that video wouldn't have been saved and put up there as evidence for the FAA and so forth if they want to pursue the whole thing. We are very self-policing now. We because we've got a lot to lose, we want to protect what we've got. If you take away those privileges from us, we've got no incentive to stop other people doing bad things. That's not our problem. It's the FAA's problem because I can't fly my drone. So why should anybody else be able to fly theirs? That's the big risk that the regulators are taking. They're going to regulate away that sense of self-responsibility and self-policing.
Oh, gosh.
Or will they?
I didn't know I was gone that long. I didn't know. I thought it was just a moment. That's what I thought. Well, there we are.
It caused quite the stir, didn't it?
There's definitely a subset of drone pilots, I think, that do think a lot like sort of GA pilots in that regard, in terms of they respect and value the same types of things like process. And then there's a subset of those that also think a lot like GA pilots who don't want to be tracked, who don't want to be visible, who don't want to be seen, but at the same time seem to have an unrealistic expectation that they should be kept safe. And it's a bit like, standing in a big room, with your eyes closed, but saying, please don't hit me, please don't hit me. You need to be able to see everything around you.
So your board meeting there. I've heard it all. Did we all see
the picture? Or see the video of the guy throwing the drone through the propeller of the light aircraft, and it just shattered to pieces of things. And again, every time we see this kind of information where someone's actually done a test, other than someone who wants to make some hysteria for a television program, that the risks are much lower than they have been presented to us. And the credibility of regulators will remain low until they can come up with these independently peer-reviewed risk assessments that validate their claims, because every time the claims are tested, they're seen not to hold up in reality. We've had so many now mid-air collisions between drones and helicopters and drones and aircraft and things. We've still got no fatalities. And so the regulators need to realize that they are pushing a very disingenuous line, and they need to come down a bit, come back to earth a little bit and start dealing with the facts and realities. At least do a comprehensive, independently peer-reviewed risk analysis that is done, because the only ones we've got are by the George Mason University, that says risk of one fatal every 400 years. The science is against what we're being told by regulators. So it's no wonder people say, I don't care about the regulations, I'm not going to follow the regulations, because they're smart enough to know that the regulators don't know what they're doing when it comes to managing the risk or assessing the risk. I think I forgot my phone. I think those which just shows that we were just part of the news cycle. They've gone away, a lot of those reports, and in fact it's turned into how drones are going to save the day and all that sort of thing. And now would be a good time to come in with the STEM aspect of model aircraft flying and jump up and down about that and let the papers know what a positive thing is, and all the young folks are looking forward to getting back into it. I'm not sure that a lot of those problem stories, other than the ones generated by the bloke flying near the Blue Angels, are going to come back much into our life anymore. And 507 says, obviously, in the US, science is the enemy right now. And yeah, that's also true. Owen, do you want to actually, Bruce, instead of me ranting, you talk to IMASL business? Well, what can I say? Everyone should join. We need a global body representing everyone. We're too disparate. We're too fractional. There's too many different factions, and it's all fragmented around the world. We're one of the few global communities that doesn't have global representation, and that's very much a weakness at the moment, because regulations are just coming in, and people, the rights and freedoms are being ridden over roughshod. Interesting what you're talking about, the public perception changing, the media changing. Everybody's changed except the regulators. They still see us as a huge threat and a risk that must be regulated out of existence almost. But the public are warming up to drones because they've delivered their essential medical supplies during lockdown, and so the regulators seem to be out of step with everybody at the moment, and so they need a little push. And I think if we get enough numbers, we can provide that little push with a bit of science and a bit of common sense and a little bit of bribery, arm twisting. I think we can get things to a reasonable level where freedoms and responsibilities are in balance.
Yeah, M0JC also can't join you on Discord. You're going to have to find some other way.
I'll put a bulletin board up down in the main street, and they can come and push pins and hold their paper up with the little bulletin board. There's not a lot of other technology options. And anyway, this is really this is just to sound it out, because unfortunately, I have a feeling that we're not going to get the numbers we need to be a viable international body. It's not going to have an international body of 300 people. It's that's not going to work. So it's a real test of the people in the community. Are they going to have the resolve to actually do something, or are they just going to expect other people to do stuff for them? And I fear that we are just too apathetic, because I've been waiting for someone to do this, start this organisation for years. Nobody seems to care enough. So I'm really deeply worried that this is just it's going to be an idea. People go, great, and then that'll be the end of it, because we won't get more than a few thousand people pushing it along.
That gives me... Sorry, Matt. This gives me the opportunity to ask Richard, how many sort of people use Altitude Angel? Is it 300 people? Is it Bruce's 300 using Altitude Angel? Or?
It's me and my brother and my family. No, just in the UK, we have probably close to about 200,000 regular active users of Drone Assist and Drone Safety Map, etc. Then we have a lot of commercial entities that use the services on the developer platform. Lots and lots of activity there, which reminds me, I wonder if you did this to remind me, Gary. Someone asked a question earlier, didn't they? Is it only recreational users that need it, or I can't remember where the question was. I'm looking down my list now. Where was it? Above and beyond drones. Yes, sound like government and delivery companies are the only ones who need UTM. That is not true. UTM is not a thing. It is a collection of services and useful aspects, right? And the fact that we are a UTM and that many people use us on a daily basis just in this very small island to obtain information about where they can and cannot fly is a clear example of why responsible drone pilots
Did you just say on a day? You didn't say 200,000 on a daily basis, did you?
Active users, yeah. So we have lots and lots of very, very active folks. We have enterprises who come and get data from us and then relay that to hundreds of their customers through their applications, etc. So it's a very complicated number to kind of pinpoint, but we certainly have a lot of our direct business customers who are what we call bureaus. So they have 10,000 users or 20,000 users of their own or more, and they come through us as a single gateway to get the information they need. So yeah, UTM is a spectrum of services, and you're absolutely right though. Most people won't need all of the services that a UTM can provide now or will go on to provide. If you're not a delivery drone company, you're probably not going to need the logistics location service to work out where you can and cannot land and whether or not that landing pad will take your type of drone and whether it's free at that time, etc., and the scheduling APIs that go with it. But if you are, then you're going to want those services. So that's partly what a UTM is about. It's about being there to support the types of complex operations that will be needed, as well as the simple ones. And we recognized really early on that it's not just the commercial companies, it's not just delivery companies that want to use the airspace. There are hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of drone pilots all around the world daily that have nothing to do with commercial use, that still want to keep doing that still need to use the airspace. But it's going to get crowded and it's going to get increasingly more difficult to do that in a way that is safe. And I still fundamentally believe the vast majority of people want to be safe. They don't want to pose a risk. Some of them will pose a risk because there's some ignorance there, or they're just not quite sure how to control their aircraft. But that comes back to, should it be incumbent on the manufacturers to do more to help people have a better experience with their products. Should it be possible for a drone to be flown at 10 miles up in the air or 6 miles up in the air or not? It's not our question to say that, or our answer to give. It's our answer to say, well, it's possible. We have services that would allow dynamic geofencing to take place, but should that be enforced by the manufacturer or not? That's down to the manufacturer at the moment. But I think it's going to be part of the regulator's job as we go forwards, right? So yeah, it was a really good question, and I've been sat on that, and luckily Gary popped that cushion for me to get in there, and I could get in there and just quickly explain that. But yeah, so much about the UTM is useful right here and right now that it's not about the fancy, sexy delivery drones using it. It's much more realistic than that on a daily basis.
It's a pity. It's a gold rush thing, isn't it? That's the trouble. Not necessarily yourself.
Where can the venture capitalists send their checks, Richard?
I'll post my home address later on. Honestly, I'm going to invest it wisely and not go to the Cayman Islands. But yeah, there are other services, right, that UTMs provide that they often don't get a lot of credit for. We famously work with NATS on AUP. We do the same now with LVNL. We're working with Norway. Just helping commercial drone pilots interact with air traffic controllers, right? So just requesting permission to fly. There's no digital telemetry exchange at the moment, although that's definitely on the cards for at least one of those territories that we've spoken to. It should be about services which make it easy to go and do the job you want to do with the drone in the place that you want to do it at the time you want to do it. And so much about our aviation system today is quite antiquated and quite old that it's really difficult to do that, right? And it's not because the air traffic controllers in many cases or the ASPs want to stop that. It's because they're the ones that carry the risk and the liability, and they don't know enough about you or what you're doing or your operation to know that it's going to be safe. So they need tools to help with that, and that's just now. But if you then have 10 pilots that want to fly in that area at the same time, then it gets harder and they need new tools. And that's the fun problem that we're trying to fix and trying to solve, so that the number of people wanting to use drones isn't a bottleneck, and actually the number of people on the other side are not the bottleneck either.
I'm just making a note. Think solving big problems is fun. Reminder: don't go to pub with Richard.
People have that reminder. It's so cozy.
I think we'd all love to go to the pub. I don't think that's an option, is it?
But to be fair, I'd even go with you at the moment, Gary.
You won't go. You won't go to the pub here. You will not go to the pub here. You'll be in deep trouble.
None of us are that desperate, Richard.
No. You're always such a sport. You come on here and we rib you mercilessly. So thank you very, very much for that.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Rupert, for explaining Scout. And if Ian doesn't burn his shed down in the production of a Scout unit, you'll have to catch up with all the fires and all.
Does it have a USB port?
I can rip that off.
Does it have a USB port?
And maybe a ribbon cable. Do it have ribbon cables?
See, just because I share all of my blunders with the world, that's I've had another 2 lipos expand on me this week, so there's every chance of something going up. So
stop charging them in the microwave.
I'd be honest, I think they're getting old. I've got a lot of old lipos here that haven't been used, and I've certainly been using them for bench testing, and they've all decided to go, I think fire would be nice right now.
I know, Ian. That's the 5G network.
Is that what it is? It's coronavirus. The coronavirus is setting my lipos
Corona batteries.
I think whatever Richard's paying Rupert, it should be twice as much anyway after putting up with this tonight. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's done very well. Done very well to stick with us. Well, I look forward to seeing your review of it, Ian.
Yeah, I will. I'll build one. I'll build one on the channel. Yeah. Let's do a build log of it.
And then let's see if we can get it. Let's see how we can get it dropped into RG Pilot as well.
Is there a supplier for the Blink boards, for the PC boards?
No, but it won't take a lot, will it? The diagram's there, so it's literally you can order 10 for £20 and pay £900 postage from China. So,
but I'm wondering if there's any, if you want to see if you get a group of people together, because you have to buy so many at a time. And it might
yeah, it's normally
cut the
minimum
cost
of
down a
10,
bit.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So just
I got
There are
I got
we
5
had a few services that do one.
Yeah.
Run one, and they're not that expensive. You look at £7 plus P&P.
Yeah.
But again, obviously the price comes down, and that's the FAQ number 2 we get is will Altitude Angel ever consider buying like 10,000 of these things and then selling them? I mean, maybe one day, not right at the moment. Having logistics and
will we
warehousing.
see a crowdfunder kit set on Indiegogo?
No.
Yeah,
God,
we're gonna
yeah.
put it up.
Oh.
We're gonna actually make money
Yeah.
from the drone industry for
No,
once.
no.
Because I think if you put it on your arm, it'll stop pain. If you tape it to your arm or your leg, it'll stop pain because it's got nano capacitors in it, hasn't it?
No. Well, the thing is,
Blockchain ones.
no. It's a complete wrong business model. Richard should offer the boards, and everyone will get a 1-year subscription of Altitude Angel. So with a 1-year subscription, you get the boards. Come on, Richard, start promoting the stuff.
When and if we release a commercial service for drone pilots to pay us for, that might be good. But right now, you don't even have to pay us. You can just go build the board and go fly.
Give the enterprise version and whatever, and just pay us now and get the free boards.
Well,
Yeah,
that
but
sounds good.
you can't do all of this until they.
Pay us. Right, that's cool.
So did you say
They've got to have this at CES before anything else, because nothing's a real product unless it's becomes CES product of the year before anyone's even had it in their hand.
Consumer electronics show. I'm not sure it's ready for that kind of prime time yet, given that it's
Nothing never is.
Even in the content description, we say this is for the hackers, the tinkerers, the makers, the doers, the inventors. That is not CES.
No, you watch generally anything that wins a prize, especially in our world at CES, is a complete fail generally.
Wins or buys a prize.
What was that?
Is it wins or buys a prize?
Oh yes, well, yes. You might conject that that's in fact how you do win a prize at CES, but anyway, that's another conversation. All right, look, we're definitely beginning to rant. Before we go, does anyone else have anything else?
Yeah, should have used a Raspberry Pi Zero.
That's what the camera's on. Yeah, I've got one of those
We need
right
to add
here.
an FAQ to this. Why didn't you use blank? Question.
Hang on. Here's my Raspberry Pi Zero. I might even have put it in the case. Yes, it is. It's in the case. Hooray. I like those things. Yeah. All right. So with that, going on.
Show and tell from Louis.
No. That's to make Ian's mad. Yes, with the Raspberry Pi Zero. See? Nice little box.
Is that the new Raspberry camera?
Yeah.
Oh, it's huge.
The lens is huge. I have the other one too. So the lens it's the lens that makes it. So you can buy with different lenses. So both
and remind me the resolution of that again.
12 megapixels, I believe.
12. Okay.
So,
yeah.
With the cameras, and yes, you can connect them. The also famous and requested by Bruce Raspberry Pi Zero.
We got very, very boring, aren't we?
In manly pink.
We're going to pull out a similar thing. We're very, very, very dull. How many single board computers do you own?
I was going to say, it's become a single board computer unboxing.
No.
Well, there's a box.
We need all the power for Bruce. So here's all the power for Bruce.
Indeed. All right. This is
Still got a
definitely
water cooler, Louis. Water cooler.
in a bucket. Going once, going twice. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Rupert. And we look forward to seeing Ian's summer solstice burning down of the shed video when he rises up. Yeah, what is not to like about it? dear viewers, jump onto their website. I think I've put it in the comments there before. Have a look at Altitude Angel. You can even look at the map from SOS News. They have an app, the name of which I've forgotten. Remind me the name of the Guardian, that's it. And it's also built into Mission Planner if you use ArduPilot. And why on earth wouldn't you have enabled the service if you have Mission Planner? All things to avoid will appear on your map. It is jolly tickety-boo. Be safe wherever you are in the world. I hope it's unlocking for you and things are getting back to normal. And we'll see you again at 2100 GMT next week when we'll probably abuse some other poor person. So cheers for now. Look after yourselves all. Bye-bye. One button, two button.